Welcome to After School with Mr. Van Huss, episode 18. Today I'm joined by a member of the Grammy-winning bluegrass group, the SteelDrivers. She is an amazing fiddle player, she's a great songwriter, she's a great producer, and she's just an all-around amazing person. Please make welcome Tammy Rogers King.
Good. All right, so welcome to After School with Mr. Van Huss. Today I get to sit down with one of the best musicians and one of the best people in Nashville, Tammy Rogers King. How you doing, Tammy?
I'm doing great this morning, Drew. How are you? Or should I call you Mr. Van Huss for your students?
You can totally call me Drew. I just make my students do that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So Tammy and I, for those watching, we have an interesting 6 degrees of separation. I think the easiest way to say it is you're my cousin's cousin.
Yes.
I think. I kind of go through Ben and Sarah, and you're related to my Uncle Dale. And yep. In East Tennessee, that makes us family.
This is family. We are cousins, exactly. Yeah.
Close enough. For those that may not be familiar with your work, can you just introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what it is you do?
Sure. Professional musician, the best way to call it. Because under that umbrella, I do a lot of different things. I've been here in Nashville. I moved here to finish college in the mid 80s and then went back to East Tennessee for a few years. Didn't really have anything going on in Nashville at that point. So that was the thing to do, move home after college. Did some teaching up there, did some playing, played with the local, Kingsport Symphony, a lot of freelance stuff. And then when I got the opportunity to come down and audition to tour with Patty Loveless in August of 1990, I got that job, won that audition, and moved back down to Nashville. And I've been here, gosh, what does that make it? 33 and a half years now, which is crazy.
Time flies when you're having fun.
So that was kind of my introduction into Nashville professionally. I've been here as a student, of course. So my first gig, as we call it, was being a member of her touring band. And that meant that most every week we'd hop on a bus and leave town either Wednesday night or Thursday night and travel and usually play a show Friday night, hop back on the bus, travel overnight, play a show Saturday night, hop back on the bus and either drive home on Sunday or maybe play a Sunday show and then get home Monday morning. And that was kind of my work week. So I was typically home during, Monday through maybe Wednesday or Thursday morning. And I did that I was with Patty for about 14, 15 months, I think. And then I got the opportunity to tour with Trisha Yearwood, who, as most people now know, is married to Garth Brooks. She wasn't at the time, but we had gone to Belmont together. So that was that connection. So I did the same thing with Trisha, hopping on the bus and being part of her touring band. I also had dreams and aspirations at that same time of getting into the recording part of music, of, being a professional musician, not just a touring musician, but a recording musician. And, I kind of grew up playing bluegrass in a family band. So from that world, if you were touring with the band, you typically recorded with the band. But in country music, it's not always like that. Most of the time, actually, the guys that play on the records don't necessarily go out and tour with the artist. You have guys that primarily stay in town and play on those records. They may play on, a Morgan Wallen record one day, and the next day play on a Hardy record, and the next day I'm trying to, get some of these more contemporary might be familiar with, but back in my day, it was certainly, playing on a Tim McGraw record and then turning around and playing on a George Strait record or whatever, So there was a real fine defined line, between recording and touring. So I started working really hard on my days off in town, that Monday through Wednesday or Thursday, trying to work my way into doing recordings and working in studios. I would go and play on demos for songwriters for, at the time, 20, $25 a song just to get the experience and get my name, networked around town. And I was pretty lucky because that started happening pretty fast for me. So I was able to get off the road, as we say, after about being here working about 3 years. So I left Trisha's band in January of 93 and just hit out on my own to be a freelance studio musician. And it's been great. It's been great. I've gotten to do all sorts of recordings, and I kept touring, but not as a full-time member of a band until I started touring with Reba McEntire in 2005. So I went back out on the road with her, and that was fun. And it was a different, certainly different level from kind of, younger artists at the time, like Patty and Trisha were, to basically an icon, superstar status level artist. And about the same time, I know I'm condensing this story because it was a lot of stuff that went on from 93 to 2005, a lot of TV work, a lot of one-off, I'd go out and, tour for somebody for just a couple weeks if they were doing something limited, part of an indie label in the mid-90s. And I think, when did you come to town?
I came to college in the fall of 96. That's when I first came to Murfreesboro.
Yeah, I was thinking I had crossed paths like at CMA and some of that stuff in the late 90s because that's when I was doing Dead Reckoning stuff.
Yep. And I started I worked a few CMA awards when I was in college, and then started interning there in 2000, and I was there like full time from 2001 to 2006, right through there. So that was kind of my CMA period and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I remember my cousin Ben and I came to a couple of shows, and I know we saw you a few times around town. I know during those Dead Reckoning days, and some things like that. And then now I want to mention you're, a member of the SteelDrivers, who are a Grammy-winning bluegrass band, who are awesome. How did they come together? I think, if I remember my history correctly, wasn't the late great Mike Henderson, wasn't he kind of instrumental in that?
Yes, he was. He was. We call him the architect of the band because he really had the vision, and he's the one that called everybody individually and kind of put us together, if you will. I had known Mike from the mid-90s, from the Dead Reckoning days. That label, he was a label mate and co-owner with me there, with Kieran Kane and Kevin Welch and Harry Stinson. So don't leave them out. But Mike and I had stayed in touch, and just out of the blue, one day, the summer of 2005, I'd been out touring with Reba, and he said, "Hey," he knew I'd grown up playing bluegrass, and he said, "Hey, do you feel like playing a little bluegrass?" And at that point, I hadn't really played any serious bluegrass in about 15 years. It had really been since I had moved from East Tennessee. I mean, sometimes I'd show up on a session and somebody would want to play like a bluegrass style tune, and it would sort of be, but not really authentically traditional bluegrass. And knowing Mike and just always thinking that whatever he was doing was cool, I was like, sure, I'll go and see what this is about. It certainly didn't sound like anything like a commitment. It was just a very casual, "Hey, you feel like getting together, with some friends?" And like, sure. So went up to his house and walked in, and I knew Richard Bailey, our banjo player, we grew up going around to a lot of the same festivals. He's a couple of years older than me, but I think I met Richard when I was 13 or 14. So we went way, way back. Hadn't seen him in a long time, but I knew Richard. And then I didn't know the bass player, Mike Fleming. We had not crossed paths. But then there was a fella sitting there at the table, and it was Chris Stapleton. And I'd heard Chris's name around town a little bit because had been in town, I think at that point, 3 or 4 years writing songs. And so I knew of him, but I had no idea what his voice sounded like. Didn't really know his songwriting at that point. But unbeknownst to me at that point, he and Mike Henderson had been writing together for 3 or 4 years. So that's how that whole crazy thing happened. And, the very first night that we got together, as you can imagine, as soon as Chris opened his mouth, it's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, his voice can get your attention real quick.
Yes. And the songs were so great. I remember thinking, is this an old Stanley Brothers song that I just know or that I've missed? That they were writing so authentically in the style that I was just knocked out, so it very quickly became, if not every Sunday night get together, most Sunday nights we get together at Mike's house, and very quickly we weren't just, nonchalant about it. We got real serious real fast because I think we all recognized this is a really unique sound.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of how it came together. And we didn't do our first gig for about 6 months because we really wanted to be ready. I mean, we knew we'd all been around town long enough, except for Chris. He was the youngest by, I think I'm 13 or 14 years older than him, but we'd all been around. So we knew that if we booked a show and played, people would come just as friends, so we wanted to really be ready for that opportunity when it happened. And that's why we just were very patient and bided our time and got our music together. And when we came out with it, it was just a big, almost explosion that, people just couldn't believe that this thing had happened without anybody knowing about it.
And I've always loved your all's music. I think one of my favorite things about that band is everybody that's been in that band has been so insanely talented and just such good musicians. And you can tell like the knowledge that you all have about the music and the care you give to the music. And it's awesome. I have my computer right now is sitting on a podium, and on the front of that podium, I've got some like random like stickers and stuff stuck on there. And I've got a bona fide Steelhead stickers right there. So there's tons of students that see that every year. Some may know it, some may not. But if they ever ask, I'm always quick to tell them, oh, there's this band you got to check out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we have an all age, it's amazing all age fan base, from the little guys all the way up to, folks in their 70s and 80s, which is really amazing to be able to play a style of music that anybody can enjoy and not just specific to teenagers or, older folks, it just crosses so many, paths that way. But yeah, to me, I think that's what keeps me interested too, is everybody in the band is allowed to bring their own personality, and nobody's expected to play a certain way, or we all are allowed to have our unique and individual voice, musical voice. And it's great because we all have played so many different styles of music. And I think that all combines to a really unique and different spin on what we do. So yeah, it's very, when I think of being happy and satisfied and creatively, inspired, it doesn't get any better than that. When you're allowed, that freedom to explore and to express yourself, it's pretty awesome.
Now, before you got into music, who were some of your heroes? Like who did you grow up listening to, and who did you like want to be like when you were first starting out?
Oh, I had a bunch of records, from people like Ricky Skaggs and Tony Rice and Jerry Douglas and J.D. Crowe and kind of those bluegrass folks that a lot of people maybe aren't familiar with unless you're really, really into bluegrass. But I was a huge Emmylou Harris fan. So even, from the time I was, I don't know, 13 or 14, just had all her records. And, she was probably the most commercially accessible artist that I was really, really into at that time. Everybody else was, like Scotty Stoneman. I say the name, unless you're really, really into fiddle music, most people are going to go, who? but it was important to me because he really influenced the way I play. and my style of fiddle playing. But yeah, I would say Emmylou was definitely, kind of that person outside the bluegrass world that I listened to more than anybody else.
So you came through high school, you went to Belmont for college. Did you have a favorite teacher or a mentor or anybody along the way that, kind of pushed you in a certain direction or inspired you in any way?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. My classical violin teacher there, a lot of people don't realize that my parents were self-taught bluegrass musicians, but I studied classical violin all the way through school. The schools that I went to, we were out in Texas at this point, had strings program. So I got to do that as part of my day, as part of a curriculum, as part, a class that I signed up for, which was amazing. From sixth grade on, I had string orchestra every day. It was just part of what my schedule every semester. So I went to college on a classical violin scholarship. And, that's what my degree is in, which, it's anything in the liberal arts. It's kind of hard to think, okay, how are you going to make money with that? Well, I don't know, but this is what I love to do. And this is, looking back now, I can go, well, yeah, I learned exactly what I needed to learn to do this career. But at the time I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I just know that I love to play the violin. But I had a great violin teacher there at Belmont that, from the very beginning, she invested so much time in me. It wasn't just, well, here's your 1 hour a week lesson. It was, okay, work on this, and then I want to see you back here on Thursday. Or, okay, let's get some extra time in this week. Come to my house and we'll do an extra lesson. She went so far above and beyond what was expected of her by the school or what she was actually even getting paid for. It was a phenomenal opportunity that she poured that much into me. And she was also the first person that told me, even while I was a student, knowing that I played other styles of music, not just classical. And she wasn't, a lot of classical people used to, I don't think it's as prevalent now, but they used to really look down on other styles of music. If you didn't play classical, then you weren't a serious musician. And she wasn't that way at all. She was very encouraging, and she thought it was great that I could do these other things. And she was, the first person that told me, oh yeah, you'll be playing recording sessions. You will. It's going to happen. And I just remember, obviously, if I remember the day she told me that, it made such a big impression that she believed in me to that level, and just, I've never forgotten it. And we've stayed in touch through the years. And I taught at Belmont as an adjunct for about 14 or 15 years. So we were able to be colleagues there, and I got to see her a lot then. I've since resigned, just got too busy with touring, but an amazing teacher and presence in my life. And still, if she sees something, happening, on social media or whatever, she's the first one to say, I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy, so we've stayed in touch. And then I also have an orchestra director that was there that's still, he was my advisor in college, and I just had breakfast with him and his wife over the holidays. So you meet those people that really are instrumental in guiding you and supporting you and believing in you in those early years. And you can form lifelong friendships that go long past, your educational relationship or, and that's invaluable. It's really invaluable.
Well, it's so cool to me as an educator and a teacher to see how you have passed that forward and, paid that forward, because earlier I talked to the kids in Troubadour Blue on an earlier episode of my little interview show here. And they named you as one of, the mentors who had affected them so much. So it's so cool to see that, you used all that and you paid it forward, you kept it going. And that's incredible. So you've got the ear of high school kids, maybe some college kids. What is one life lesson that you would pass on to them today about just living life, chasing their dreams, whatever?
One thing I think is dream big. Dream big. I think I fell into coming from small area and, honestly, in a way, not dreaming big enough. And so I was kind of held my own self back for a few years, just not really believing that I could do this crazy thing, you know, called music. And once I got that one opportunity, then this whole other world opened up to me. So, and then I saw how much is possible. And of course, then my dreams changed and evolved. So, I wish that I had dreamed a little bigger to begin with, but we all do the best we can with what we've got, but also don't be afraid to let your dreams evolve, because that's really what happened with me is as I got my foot in the door and as, things changed, suddenly my dreams changed and they did get bigger. And, I'm pretty happy to say that, most of the things that I dreamed of have happened. And I think when you allow yourself, to dream that way, you start making decisions that help you point towards that. So it's, if you want to call it dreaming, if you want to call it, kind of setting a target and self-motivating, whatever, it's all kind of the same thing, because at the end you just want to get to those points. And then at that point, oh, okay, what else can I do?
Very good. Very good advice. I'll tell you one last quick funny story is I hadn't really thought about this, but it just hit when you were talking about one of your first gigs being with Patty Loveless. Technically, I would say my first ever music business job was also with Patty for one day, because I was a talent escort when I was still at MTSU for the CMA Awards. And for people watching, you get talent escorts, it's just college kids who are trying to get their foot in the door, and they're at these award shows. And my whole job was basically just to stand against the wall and keep an eye on an artist and know where they were if, somebody needed them real quick. And I lucked up getting paired with Patty Loveless that year. I guess it was about 97-ish, somewhere right through there. And so I'll never forget my first experience. It poured down rain that day of the CMA Awards, and Patty stayed on her bus a lot of the afternoon. And so I remember just kind of meeting her, and I was just standing out there under her umbrella waiting for her to go do something. And that was my first intro to music business and stuff, but it was funny. But Patty she was lovely. She was great. But I thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me. I know my students will love hearing this, and it means a lot that you would take the time. And even though we're distant family, I've always been a fan of yours and have followed what you do. And you're a great person, and I really, really appreciate it. I hope so badly I can get out to a SteelDrivers show this year somewhere, because it's been too long. So I'm gonna have to get out one day.
Well, we are playing May 16th at the Ryman this spring.
All right.
Big show for us. So we always, it's like hallowed ground. There's so much history just in the building itself, but I also love how it sounds in there, everything about that experience. So
well, that's my favorite place to see a show. So I may have to see if we still got some tickets available. Check it out.
Me too. I'm so glad that they saved it back in the early 90s, because what a gift to the town, because I'm with you. That's my absolute favorite place to play, to go see a show. It's just spectacular.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me, and I greatly appreciate you staying after school with Mr. Van Huss.